Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and we're continuing the discussion about the state of the city. And to help us understand it this evening, we have with us the City Councilor At-Large, Hannah Bowen. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you.
So, the state of the city is getting a little exciting. We had an interesting council meeting the other day, and got into two issues that are kind of hot on the topic.
Yeah.
The zoning change for Rantoul Street and Cabot Street, and also the city charter changes that are being proposed, and we get to vote on them in November. So start thinking about that, ladies and gentlemen. What are you going to say about the city charter? But anyway, so the recommendation from the mayor got adjusted by the subcommittee of the city council and went through pretty much as they passed it at the subcommittee, right?
Yep. Close to.
So the question comes down to is, and we had a discussion with Cabot Rantoul about this, and what he was saying is that we should probably have sorted out the design standards first before we tried to do the adjustments to the zoning, and the adjustments to the zoning is kind of a patchwork.
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, how would you see this downtown area of Beverly?
Yeah. So, I agree with Councilor Rotundo that tackling the whole picture of what do we want the city of Beverly to look like as it continues to grow would have been a more logical order and given us, I think, a better result, because where we landed, the mayor's proposal around heights went through the planning board. They recommended one set of adjustments, and then the council sort of went back towards the mayor's recommendations. But we had a really healthy debate about what we want the city to look like going forward, what we want the city to feel like going forward. And unfortunately, I don't think what we actually voted on Monday addressed all of those issues that came up. We did, I'm very excited, we passed a deepening of the inclusionary housing ordinance. So I was glad the mayor's team brought that forward right up front. I think that was something we could do in a kind of standalone way. That's not a temporary fix or a patchwork. That's a real recognition that as new developments go up, they have to include affordable units. And so they will include more affordable units going forward.
So what's it going to be now?
So now 12% of a new building, 12% of the units have to be affordable to someone that is making less than or up to 60% of the area median income. And so what affordable means in that case is basically a third of your income, which as someone who pays a third of my not particularly large income on rent, like that's a lot. It doesn't leave you much else to spend on, but it's doable. And so that's how, and that's a formula that's not set by the city, but a formula that works and that we can base our zoning restrictions on.
So the median income is around $75,000.
Yeah, and it's set for the whole greater Boston area. It's not just set for Beverly.
So it's higher than 70,000?
A little bit.
How much?
I think the median is somewhere in the 80s, and so the 80% threshold or the 60% threshold bring it down from there for who can qualify for those affordable units.
You say the median is 80,000, you're taking 60% of that. That's 48,000.
Well, and they also judge it by if you're a one-person household, a two-person household, a three-person household.
It's complicated,
yeah.
But basically for a family, it would be around 48,000.
It would be higher for a family, and and you actually, I mean, in that sort of greater Boston area, if you're earning less than like 80 to 100,000 as a family of 3 or 4, you're finding it really hard to find a place to rent right now. And there is a need for those restrictions to be in place to keep some of the rents down where you can afford them.
When they say they have to provide 12% of the building. Are they required to do it in the building, or can they continue to donate the equivalent amount of money to a kitty?
Yeah, so we did, in the votes on Monday, make a change. So previously, developers who were creating rental units could provide that percentage of them on site as affordable units. And they have to, it's, I think, important, they have to be sort of the same quality and style and mixed in throughout the building. But they could also provide the same number of units that were calculated off-site in a different location in the city previously. And we changed that on Monday. So now those 12% of units have to be in the building that's being created. Yeah. There is still a provision if you are building, if you're developing new units for sale, you can still contribute sort of the value to the Affordable Housing Trust, which allows us to create affordable housing in other ways. And our Affordable Housing Trust doesn't have a whole lot in it right now, but has been used to create deeply affordable units in the city.
Yeah, the only problem with that is it's hard to find land.
Yep. Which is why, I mean, some of the things that we've been doing as a city are really creative and helpful. The adaptive reuse of the Briscoe School. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a plot of land that was city-owned and is now going to be senior housing, artist space, community space. That's a great example of that creative use of zoning and funds.
One of the things that bothered me about that Briscoe conversion when it first happened is all the emphasis was on artist space. And I got talking with Andrew DeFrenza, and he says, no, there's 87 units in that building for affordable housing.
Yeah.
And he talks about housing that is affordable, which is another game. And so I feel much better about the way that's turned out. The fact that they saved the auditorium, which was the best one we've got in the city, and hate to see that turn into something some developer can convert to a few more apartments. So,
and I think that's the kind of development, when you ask about sort of what do we want the city to look and feel like, that's the sort of development that I think we're looking for, where you get to preserve the history and the architecture, you get affordability, you get some community space, because I think the space for artists is also key to our personality and vibrancy as a city. You know, we have an art school right downtown. We want artists to feel welcome and to have spaces to stay. So I think that's a great example, and that's what I want to see more of. You know, that building, I think, is more than 35 feet tall, right? Oh, yeah. So that's why I was sort of frustrated with the discussion being just about height, because that's one tool to limit growth, literally and figuratively. Yeah. But it doesn't really, it doesn't get us a project like that. And there are a lot of other things that could.
Oh, yeah. At the same time, you're not going to tear down Briscoe, but it's more than 35 feet tall.
No.
That's...
No, so. But there are communities that, would sell that off without the kinds of restrictions that we put in place and not ask for the things that we asked for. So I think it's really good that we did that. That's the mindset we should have going forward, not do nothing, but also not tear down and start fresh.
What else do you think the downtown should look like?
So, I mean, I live downtown, and I love that it is walkable. So I think as we think about issues around congestion and parking and traffic, like, let's double down on the walkability and make it easier for people to get downtown without a car, or to park their car and enjoy downtown without having to move it, from here to there to go to dinner and then see a show and then see something else. And I think the variety of small businesses that we have is really special and is something we want to continue. And so that's one of the reasons I think we do need to continue adding density at a reasonable pace and well managed, and in a way that encourages, reuse of buildings, keeping the facades, making them tasteful, and packing the density into something that doesn't change the feel of the neighborhood. But the people that sustain all those small businesses we need and will continue to need. So I do think there is space for more density downtown. I understand the pain points that people feel around that, and I think we could do a better job of managing them in some cases. But I also think the density we've added so far has been a success. When I walk around downtown, it doesn't feel overcrowded to me all the time. On a day when we have a lot going on, it starts to, and I think that's a good sign.
Oh, yeah. When you have one of the big shows where they set up the tents on
which is great.
Cabot Street,
Yeah,
that brings out the neighborhood and kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you start to talk about maintaining the facade. Me personally, I think that fiasco over saving the train station hotel and the DeLuca just got totally out of hand in that. And I recently saw an article in Architects Daily or something like that, where they're talking about Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And the 20 new buildings that are worth seeing if you're an architect or something and you go to Copenhagen. And you think about some of these old European cities, they've got a lot of stuff that's worth saving.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they are investing in relatively contemporary design. Yeah. And there's got to be, I think, a better balance than that fiasco down by the train stations is that, some things are worth saving, but one that turned into a sports bar and the other was a restaurant that wasn't quite making it. What's the value of them?
Yeah.
And the hassle that you put the contractor through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, so people have a lot of emotional attachment to some of those places, and that's great. Like, we want people to be emotionally invested in the city. And I actually think that process went pretty well. It was messy. There were lots of public meetings. I was at them. Lots of public comment. I think it was a little painful for the developers to go through multiple rounds of design. Yeah. And I think the final design is much better than the original design. Okay. I think the developers are going to be proud of that building when it's finished.
Okay.
I think they're going to do just fine financially. And I think we, as neighbors of that area, did well, because regardless of how you feel about the sort of historic character of the building on the corner that's being saved itself, it is lower. It is approachable. It has that look of the neighborhood between Cabot and Rantoul. It ties things together. It softens that corner. So I think those are all big wins from a design standpoint, and for the people that really feel that emotional connection, for the people who really care about historic preservation, it's an even bigger win. So I think that's actually the process working well, and I think that's a good example of it allows for more units, that it's going up to that height, but through the process, we were able to balance, the number of units, the historic character, the design work, and as messy as it is, I think that's great. And I think that's the sort of process that we need. And I worry a little bit that if we go down this path of there's too much happening, we need to just slow things down without engaging in how to do that responsibly and how to manage the growth responsibly, we're just going to scare off new neighbors and new businesses, and I worry, and it's hard to know when you're hitting that point. But like our vote on Monday was a little bit more symbolic than real, I think, because in the end, it's not that big a change. It only addresses height. It doesn't address anything else. Mm-hmm. But the signal it sends is we don't want any more creative, interesting building here. We just don't want any building. And that I think that's a difficult line to walk. So I'm hopeful that when we get to the design standards conversation, we're able to send the message that, we understand that further development and redevelopment and reuse is needed in the city, and we want to be partners in that so that the buildings that we get, the neighbors that move in, the businesses that invest here are supported and fit.
Well, when you start to talk about the neighbors that move in, you're really addressing TOD, transient-oriented development, that essentially the city becomes a bedroom community supporting Boston.
So I don't think that's necessarily true. I think a lot of those neighbors moving in are moving from one part of Beverly to another, or they're moving from Salem to Beverly, or they're people like me who grew up here in Swampscott, not Beverly, but grew up on the North Shore, left, lived all over, lots of different places, wanted a small city, didn't want to move into Boston, and landed here. And, it's not like I walk to work, live and work in Beverly.
Yeah.
I rarely use my car, so I sort of fit that transit-oriented development model. I'm not adding to traffic most days, but not because I just sleep in Beverly and spend my life in Boston. Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people like that. There are people who, had a multi-bedroom house and want to move into an apartment because they're retiring and don't want the upkeep, or family members who have all been in one house for a while, and then an adult child wants to move out on their own. It's a lot of that is what's happening. And yes, some of it is also people who have never set foot in Beverly and are looking for the next place to land. And I think we should be welcoming to those people as well.
Yeah.
It's a mix. It's a big mix.
Way back when I was one of those too, because I got a job at GE, and all of a sudden I got to move into this area. So I just lucked out and hit a good deal in Beverly.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that I started doing numbers, and I was talking with Andrew DeFrenza again about somebody making $15 an hour minimum wage, the new minimum wage. Yeah. That's $30,000 a year, roughly. I take a third of that as for apartments. That's $750 a month. Yeah. You can't get anything within miles of here for $750 a month. And all of a sudden it dawned on me when I bought my house, I was making $30,000 a year. And 55 years ago, that was good money. Yeah. And it was good enough that I could buy a house for $32,000, because the rules back then were you never bought a house more than 1 year's salary.
Yeah. Imagine being able to buy a house now for $80,000. Yeah. Which is a decent salary.
And that really gets down to one of the problems that affects the way the city grows. Yeah. Is that it's a totally different ballgame. And as Andrew describes it, as the divergence between standard of living in terms of what's a house going to cost you, or an apartment or a condo, and the kind of money people can earn. Yeah. And that has split dramatically. Yep. To the point that how do we solve the problem of, okay, you got a bunch of people working in the vibrant community, the service industry, where do they live? And this is one of the things that, the city makes some inroads into the 12% affordable housing on site. Yeah. Hey, those are all great improvements. Yeah. But Jesus, a long way to go.
Yeah, and that's where that's where it's not just Beverly. So I think we have to do everything we possibly can, and we're doing a lot of it. We can do a little bit more, and we need to push for other communities. We need to push for coordinated regional and state action. So, there's been a lot of talk about the MBTA Communities Act and how that is requiring everyone who has access to the MBTA to adjust their zoning to allow for denser development in their communities. We already just about meet that. I'm a little nervous when we recalculate with these new height requirements if we need to make further adjustments to continue meeting it. But we have been a community that was not at the very forefront, but sort of keeping pace with reality quite well. And a lot of our neighbors haven't. And I know I've heard that actually a lot from neighbors who want development to slow here. They say, we've done our part, we've done enough. And I understand where that's coming from. And that pressure is now there on other communities. If they want to continue having access to state funding for a lot of projects they want, going to need to change zoning. We're going to see development in some of those other communities. I don't think that allows us to step back because the problem is big enough that we need to keep doing what we're doing alongside everybody else who's been lagging, catching up. So I think I think these next 5 years or so are going to see a lot of shifts because of that. So, in a good way.
When I first moved into town, again, it's 55 years ago, it was a town.
Yep.
And now it's a city. There used to be a board of aldermen. Now it's a city council. And it's now got a strong mayor, which is more city-like. And yet, surrounding the downtown area, it gets to be pretty rural.
It still feels like a town in a lot of ways.
It still feels like a town. So within the city, we've got this disparity of types of standard of living, what you expect between the downtown and the surrounding. And
in a way that I think is a great balance and something we should be really proud of, and think about what can we learn from how Beverly has developed in that time so that we shape what it looks like in the next 55 years really carefully. And that's where I think the idea of some of the other neighborhood centers that are still a little bit car-centric more than downtown could, see some further residential development, could see just some creative ways of making the sort of whole area more walkable. So just like downtown, you sort of go and park your car and then do 5 things before you go back to it. So I think, allowing development in some other areas of town that doesn't replicate downtown, but does create, some of the things that we've learned about downtown development. And then I think other things was really excited to have several other councilors talk about the accessory dwelling unit ordinance that we're hopefully moving forward quickly. That's exactly the kind of development that you can see that keeps that sort of neighborhood feel, that you put in requirements so that any new unit that's added to what's currently a single family home or a duplex, whatever new unit you add has to look and feel like the units that are there and has to be a reasonable size. And that's a way that you can keep that feeling of, okay, we have a downtown center, we have a neighborhood center, and we have residential neighborhoods that feel like they could be in a smaller town. They just happen to be within the city limits of Beverly.
So we do have a mix of lots of different things. And
we want to keep some of that mix going.
And the areas that I continually think about is Folly Hill. How is that going to get developed? It's on 128. It has access. It sounds like something ought to be more commercial, but yet at the same time, people are going to have to work there. Where are they going to live? How do you come up with a blend in that? And basically, it comes down to there's a lot more work to do. And as we were talking before the show, you want to continue at it. And you want to run for re-election.
I know, it's already that time.
It's already that time. So, would you like to make your story to the...
Sure, to the fancy camera here. So I've really been enjoying this role and learning a lot in it. And I think, we were talking earlier about the charter review that is going to be in front of voters in November as well. So, this November already, we're going to be voting for the mayor's seat, for all of the city council seats, all of the school committee seats, and for some structural changes around the length of the mayor's term, the membership of the school committee, a couple other small things that got bundled in that will be on the ballot. And through that process of going through the charter process, that was part of what got me to run for office to begin with, thinking about the role of the city council, what we do, all the different types of policies that we influence, even in a strong mayor system, and how we create the space for the debate like you saw on Monday night, where it's not happening just in the kind of technical behind the scenes space. It's happening out in public. We're representing all the neighborhoods of the city. And, we're able to hear public comment, deliberate, and make decisions in the way we think is best for the city. And going through that process over this last year plus and thinking ahead, I'm just so excited about the opportunities we have here in Beverly and as a council. It's been a great group to work with. And so I feel like 2 years goes by very quickly. Mm-hmm. And when I think about the work that we have ahead, I'm thrilled to be in a position to even be thinking about running again, continuing to serve, continuing to work with my colleagues on the council and the rest of city government, because it's a really exciting time for Beverly. And I think we can really dig into more zoning conversations, more development conversations, and get that balance right, and really focus in on things like how we spend the city's money to provide the public services that people want. So one of the things I'm really excited about this year is getting a different presentation of the city budget for the first time, something we've been asking for, something we're going to get this spring. So there's just so much happening, and I think it takes a year or more to even feel like you have a handle on it. And with that sense, now I'm even more excited to keep going. So I hope I will have that opportunity, but really looking for the next 6 months before even we're at full election mode, we still have a lot to do even in this term. So.
Yeah, good. And as you started to mention, there's a lot more worth talking about what's going on with the city. So would like to invite you back to continue this discussion.
Absolutely.
Because there's so many things that would like to hear your opinion on. Folly Hill is just one of them. Mm-hmm. The development in Ward 5, well, it's not specifically your ward. Yeah. It's still your responsibility as part of that being at large. Yeah. And one of the issues that came up about the 35-foot limit is that's a real crimp on some industries who want to develop something. Yeah. And as I drive down 128, and I go by the Cummings Center that's down in Woburn or something, and hey, that's more than 35 feet tall. So that's the direction that part of the city it probably should be going in. Yeah. And I'm back to my favorite kick that everybody that works in Beverly Shores should be able to live here.
Agreed.
And everybody that lives here should be able to work here. Mm-hmm. And that's the way the city is. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching us this evening. And as indicated, we will have more of these kinds of discussions. And when you get to the end of the credits, you'll find my email address. If you've got some questions that you want to see raised, or if you would like to come and express your opinion, we can always make room for you at the table. And thanks again for watching, and stay tuned.